12 and a half years ago, Dr. Brené Brown gave her first TED Talk on the topic of power of vulnerability. It was a huge success, over 45 million views within just a few days. It went viral in no time at all. So many people resonated with Brown's research findings about this central aspect of the human spirit. Parallel to this was the vitriol leveled against Brown. It was horrifying. And in fact, years later, she writes how her husband advised her that at that time, please, whatever you do, don't read the comments. Of course she did. And she was utterly devastated by them. They were vile, they were cruel, throwing her personal world into confusion and self-doubt and depression. It took months for her to regain an equilibrium. None of us are as high profile as Brené Brown, but it doesn't matter. We have witnessed, or we have been the recipients of, extremely hateful outbursts. And it can happen overnight. I don't know what this week has brought for all of you, but the past weeks have been intense. We've experienced loss in our congregation, bitter disappointments in our city, tremendous upheaval in our country, and ongoing terrorism in different parts of the world, including Ukraine. People have, and they express opinions about most of that. It seems like whiplash. Last Sunday, we were heartened and warmed by our two speakers who shared their personal experiences so candidly. I hope these people have buoyed your spirits throughout this week, and I certainly hope that they have not experienced backlash. 2 weeks ago, we had another inspiring experience, a baptism, new members, and a commemoration of the life-giving wind of the Spirit, which the text that Delane read for us also speaks about. When we hear profound stories and are encouraged by our own spiritual tradition on the one hand, and then we read and we hear the language that comes from people's mouths and their keyboards and their pens, and we're dumbfounded. I won't go into too much detail, but here are a few of the comments that I've heard or read recently. They shouldn't feel safe in their own homes. They will burn in hell for, and you fill in the blank. Look at the photos of those people. They appear to be mostly gay. I wonder if that had any bearing on them being able to obtain financing. What are the chances of them donning orange jumpsuits in the near future? We should have never believed in you. You are a blight on our society. These kinds of comments are poison to our souls and our psyches, just as this air is to the lungs of the New York City residents. It's toxic. It exacerbates existing health struggles like asthma and heart disease. It's debilitating, wears the body down, making it more susceptible to other invasions, such as the coronavirus, for example. The same is true when we hear or read caustic statements, when they are directed at our own person or against another human being. They are toxic. They exacerbate emotional struggles that are existing, such as one's sense of safety and personhood. They wear down the spirit and the mind, making us more susceptible to other debilitating messages. What would happen if we were to choose a different course? What if we chose open-heartedness? What if we chose not to base our opinions on flimsy outward appearances? One of you recently told me the story of a dating show where potential romantic partners initially were not allowed to see the other person, and they based their opinions exclusively on communication and values and experiences and character and those kinds of things. Attraction and compatibility began to develop from this connection. Once they met face to face, some of them found the other person physically unattractive, and all the other connections and compatibilities evaporated. What if we chose not to base our opinions on flimsy outward appearances? What if we chose not to base our opinions on ever-changing stories? Would it make a difference in how we make our decisions to believe that everyone is doing the best they can? That's what it means not to judge by appearance, isn't it? That's open-heartedness. Not making snap judgments after hearing one news report or reading a few articles or seeing a comment thread on social media. It's giving people the benefit of the doubt, allowing them their own humanity. Another word for that is grace. Jesus clearly instructed his followers not to judge so that they would not be judged, reminding them that the cards you deal are the same ones that will be dealt to you. But not being judgmental toward others does not guarantee that they will not judge you or us. Is it still worth taking the risk? Still worth taking the high road? What if, instead of judging and firing back with equally barbed responses, we were willing to face the pain that these judgments cause? To acknowledge our words is harder than offloading them onto others. When we have wounds, it feels like our right to defend ourselves with even deadlier weapons than the ones hurled at us. Those who throw shade or level judgment do not value others as humans, as people with their own lived experience and emotions. Those who judge others are sometimes critical or jealous of someone else's work, or afraid that their own value system will topple if they don't attack realities that are foreign to them. What if we faced our pain so we don't keep that cycle of pain going over and over again? Is this not what Jesus did at his execution when he said, "Abba, God, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing"? If we take time to feel pain in our own souls and bodies, it allows us time to think about what a constructive response would or could be. Sometimes no response is the best. Other times, a thought-through and well-crafted response is necessary. When injustice is thrown around or lies flourish, staying silent is not an option. The question becomes, how will we show up and what will we say? What if, in this deeply troubling and confusing and polarizing time, we refused to gossip or to make our decisions based on hearsay, as our text puts it? Each day, we receive thousands of messages, verbal, written, visual. They're contradictory, confusing, sometimes cruel and dehumanizing. So what do we believe? And how do we come to a point of clarity? It takes time, patience, open-heartedness, a call for the life-giving Spirit, and a conscious decision to curb gossip in ourselves and in the circles that we inhabit. Few people put forth the effort to learn as much as possible before forming strong and often rigid opinions about developing stories, about another person and their place in life, or about cultural trends and how they impact our lives. Laziness is not an option when we want to live in the Spirit's wisdom and understanding. Patience isn't a virtue that is prized in our culture. but it is certainly important for people of the Spirit. What if we would consistently take a few deep breaths before we shout or curse or form an opinion about a person, a group of people, or an action? Diligence and patience are countercultural. Social justice begins in the heart, in the mind, and in the tongue. What if we chose fairness? Our text reads, "The Spirit of God will rest on you, and you will treat poor people with fairness and uphold the rights of the downtrodden." It's just a matter-of-fact statement. Remember that this is the Spirit that we commemorated and celebrated at Pentecost. And here is the evidence that this same Spirit is present. Fairness for poor people. Upholding the rights of those who are at the short end of the stick. Does this address where city money should be spent and calling it out when it's diverted elsewhere? Like from a hospital in a vulnerable community to a medical facility in an affluent part of town? Does it include calling on city government to invest in streets in certain zip codes that haven't been repaired in decades? Does it include having our eyes open to those who are overlooked, like the missing middle, people who are in good professions, but they still cannot afford to purchase or rent their own home? Fairness for all people and for poor people. Rights for the downtrodden. It is not ours to decide that some are worthy and some are not. If human dignity is trampled, this is not fair. If we kick somebody who's already down, even if it is only verbally or behind closed doors or with the distance of this online platform, this is not what Jesus taught us with the Good Samaritan. If the Spirit of God rests on us, we will be open-hearted. We will use respectful language. We will be fair. In other words, we will take responsibility. What if we consistently took responsibility? Responsibility for our own attitudes, our responses when we're humiliated, our action or our inaction. Following the Spirit creates mindsets and values and words that are identifiable as uplifting and not destructive. We show our love by first taking care of our own pain so that we don't pass it along to others. Sometimes this love will show up as silent solidarity. Other times it will meet exploiters head on. If we want to rid ourselves and our communities of the toxins and the judgments, gossip, unfairness, and hate, it takes hard work and conscious commitment. Historian and theologian Diana Butler Bass wrote these words just a few days ago, and I quote, "Love must be organized, active, and committed to the full dignity and worth of everyone. It isn't enough to preach against hate. Hate is infiltrating our everyday lives, like the poisoned air filtering down from northern wildfires, hardly visible until the air is so thick with toxins that no one will be able to breathe. You can't get rid of the smoke. You have to put out the fire." End quote. What if we became known as those who put out fires? May it be so.